He used to sit down every day and make me go through the pains of perhaps mistakes made, of big denials, of huge, great hurdles in my life in growing up.
She anchored at Windsor to carry out state business. He settled into the quiet of Wood Farm while remaining, by every account available, a close and devoted couple. It's also worth noting that Philip and Elizabeth had reportedly kept separate bedrooms for most of their 73-year marriage, a practice that was not unusual among the British upper class of their generation, and long predates his move to Wood Farm. Separate sleeping arrangements were a matter of custom, not conflict, for aristocratic couples of that era, a detail that has sometimes been misread by outside observers as evidence of a distant marriage, when contemporaries and biographers describe the opposite, a partnership built on mutual respect, and especially after 7 decades of public duty, mutual permission to have some space of one's own. Wood Farm had other visitors too. Countess Mountbatten of Burma, known as Penny Romsey, a close friend of Philip's connected to the family through his uncle Lord Mountbatten, reportedly stayed with him there on occasion and later attended both his funeral in 2021 and the Queen's funeral in 2022. The pandemic changed the arrangement. In March 2020, as COVID-19 spread through the UK, Philip left Wood Farm and joined the Queen at Windsor Castle, where the two isolated together in what royal staff reportedly nicknamed HMS Bubble. He did not return to live at Wood Farm afterward. Philip died at Windsor Castle on April 9, 2021, at age 99, following a period of declining health that included heart surgery earlier that year. To really understand why Wood Farm mattered so much to Philip, it helps to step back and look at the shape of his marriage. Philip and Elizabeth married on November 20, 1947, and from the moment she became queen in 1952, Philip's own career effectively ended. He had been a promising naval officer, and by several accounts had hoped to continue that path, but the role of consort to the monarch didn't allow for it. For the rest of his working life, his job was, in essence, to support her, walking a step behind at official events, holding his opinions in check in public, and finding ways to be useful without ever overshadowing her constitutional position. He carved out his own areas of focus over the decades, founding the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme for young people, serving as a patron and president of hundreds of organizations, and becoming known for a blunt, sometimes controversial sense of humor that made him a distinct public figure in his own right. But structurally, his entire adult life was organized around being the second person in the room. Royal commentators and biographers have repeatedly pointed to this dynamic 70 years of near-constant public duty and protocol as the context that makes his choice of Wood Farm in retirement so telling. It wasn't a rejection of his marriage or his wife. It was, by most credible accounts, the first time in decades that Philip got to organize his own days entirely around his own preferences: carriage driving, painting, reading, and privacy. The Queen, for her part, appears to have understood this and supported it rather than resisting it. Biographers describe her making the trip up to Norfolk by train on weekends specifically to be with him, rather than requiring him to relocate back to her. That detail matters because it flips the usual assumption people make about royal marriages and separate living. It wasn't that the more powerful spouse dictated the terms and the other complied. It was the Queen adjusting her own schedule to accommodate her husband's wish for a quieter, simpler life, while he in turn built a home a short train ride away, rather than disappearing entirely from her orbit. Their arrangement wasn't without its complications. In January 2019, when Philip was 97, he was involved in a serious car accident near the Sandringham estate. After his Land Rover overturned close to a busy road, he was uninjured, but 2 people in the other vehicle involved were hurt. According to reporting at the time, the Queen enlisted the help of Penny Romsey, the same close family friend who had spent time with Philip at Wood Farm, to help persuade him to voluntarily give up his driving license, which he did within about 3 weeks of the crash. It's a small detail, but it says something about how the people around Philip in his final years handled him, not through official decree, but through personal relationships and gentle persuasion, the same low-key approach that defined his time at the farmhouse itself. Wood Farm also had a life beyond Philip's own residency in it. It has long served, according to multiple royal sources, as a guest house for family members who wanted privacy away from the main house. Diana, Princess of Wales, reportedly stayed there during a shooting party in the early days of her relationship with Prince Charles, before their engagement. Decades later, Catherine Middleton, now the Princess of Wales, stayed at Wood Farm during early visits to Sandringham, while she and Prince William were still dating. For the same reason it let her be part of estate life, without the formality and the public attention that would have come with a stay inside Sandringham House itself. Here's where the story gets its emotional weight. Wood Farm was not just Philip's retirement retreat. It had already earned a very different nickname decades earlier, at least where Sarah Ferguson was concerned. Ferguson married Prince Andrew in 1986, separated from him in 1992, and divorced in 1996. During and after that period she became, by multiple accounts, someone Prince Philip wanted little to do with. Royal author Ingrid Seward and other royal commentators have described Philip as having disliked Ferguson even before she married into the family, and the relationship worsened dramatically after 1992, when paparazzi photographs of Ferguson on holiday with her financial advisor John Bryan made front-page news, embarrassingly, while the family was gathered at Balmoral. According to royal historian Kenneth Rose's published journals, Ferguson told him she still had letters from Philip telling her she had let down the firm. Things deteriorated further in 2010 when Ferguson was caught in a newspaper sting attempting to sell access to Prince Andrew for £500,000. The fallout from that scandal forced her to publicly defend herself, including in a widely covered appearance on Oprah. Multiple royal commentators have said this was the point at which Philip's disapproval hardened into something closer to permanent estrangement for years afterward. By several accounts, he avoided being in the same room as her at family gatherings, including at Balmoral. Because of that rift, when Ferguson wanted to be near her young daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, during the Christmas holidays without attending the Queen's official festivities at Sandringham House, where she was no longer welcome, she stayed at Wood Farm. That's reportedly how the farmhouse picked up its other nickname among royal watchers, the divorce home. The estrangement wasn't just about Christmas logistics. Multiple royal sources describe a period of roughly 13 years, during which Ferguson didn't attend gatherings at Balmoral at all because of the friction with Philip. When she did eventually return, one of her friends told a reporter in 2005 that Philip avoided her like the plague, and that the two barely exchanged a word across an entire week's stay. For years, palace logistics were reportedly arranged specifically to keep the two of them from crossing paths, and when that wasn't possible, Ferguson was said to be given instructions not to interact or dine with him directly. The thaw, when it eventually came, was gradual and tied to family milestones rather than any single reconciliation. Ferguson and Philip were both guests at Prince Harry's wedding in 2018, an occasion royal watchers have described as something of a trial run for the two of them being in the same space again. Months later, at Princess Eugenie's wedding to Jack Brooksbank in October 2018, Philip, by then 97, and retired from public duties, reportedly acknowledged Ferguson and even smiled toward her during the ceremony. In the family photograph taken afterward, Ferguson was standing beside a seated Philip, a detail that stood out to observers given the decades of distance between them. So the same four walls held two completely different experiences. For Philip, decades later, Wood Farm represented freedom, a reward after 70 years of formality and duty. For Ferguson in the 1990s, it represented exile, a place to wait out a holiday she wasn't allowed to fully join. That symmetry has continued into the present. In February 2026, Prince Andrew, who was stripped of his remaining royal titles and styles, and now goes by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, moved into Wood Farm after leaving Royal Lodge, his longtime Windsor residence, as part of the wider fallout connected to his conduct and his association with Jeffrey Epstein. His stay there has been described as a temporary arrangement, intended to last only until renovations are completed at Marsh Farm, another property on the Sandringham estate. That same month, Andrew was reportedly arrested at Wood Farm on suspicion of misconduct in public office, following the release of further documents related to the Epstein case. It's a striking historical echo. The same modest farmhouse that once sheltered Andrew's ex-wife during a period of exclusion from the family is now, decades later, temporary shelter for Andrew himself, at what is by any measure the lowest point of his own standing within the family and the country. Sarah Ferguson and Andrew have continued to live together as a household, even after their 1996 divorce, which makes Wood Farm's role in both of their lives at very different times, for very different reasons, even more pointed. Ferguson has spoken publicly about Philip on several occasions in recent years, most notably during a 2023 appearance on Alan Carr's podcast, Life's a Beach, where she was promoting her novel, A Most Intriguing Lady. Her comments: "There are some of the most candid she's given about her father-in-law, and they're worth hearing in full context rather than as scattered sound bites." Asked about Philip, Ferguson described him as intimidating in everyday conversation, recalling that if you asked what felt like an ordinary question, he'd push back hard, the kind of exchange that could rattle your confidence in seconds. She impersonated his clipped, no-nonsense way of asking about her day, quizzing her on whether she'd gone out driving or riding, and needling her if she hesitated on the answer. But alongside that, she was clear that she respected him deeply. She called him a very wise man, and shared a piece of advice he'd once given her that had stuck with her for decades, that a member of the royal family had to be electable but never elected, meaning likable and publicly appealing, but never someone who sought power or position for themselves. Ferguson said that line still resonated with her. She's also spoken warmly, in separate